Okay. So, thank you all so much for coming to Adult Forum. Truly, I appreciate you all coming here. I truly appreciate all the support. It means a lot to me, and thank you for all the support you've given to me throughout this day and just throughout this journey. And just, yeah, I'm going to try not to tear up in the middle of this already. Wait to the end. Okay, so how many people have heard of RFK Jr.? Yeah, I know, silly question. Yeah, well, I'm just going to come out and say it. It's not a good time to be autistic. It's not a fun time to be autistic. It's not a pleasant time. I'd love to say it begins and ends with RFK. It doesn't. I know that. Every autistic person knows that. But it does it still hurt to hear the way that we're talked about. So here's how I see structuring this. I'm going to take a quote he did, because there's so much to unpack in this one quote. I'm going to give you two other stereotypes outside of this quote and kind of talk about things from there. Okay, first stereotype I'm going to give you actually doesn't come from him. It came from somebody that I sent another of my one adult formations to, and he was listening to it, and I explained my credentials that I am did my dissertation on autism. I'm an expert in autism. And he said I basically couldn't get through this presentation because you said autistic person instead of person with autism. Oh, so that's a stereotype that autistic people do not know what to call themselves, and we must adhere to these standards. This happens more often than you think. So, I do have autism. I call myself an autistic person because I consider it part of my essence. I understand why people would want the person first. There are plenty of people with autism who do use person first. I do not judge them. I think that's the best decision for them. If you say Dana is a person with autism, I don't care. I'm not going to get bent out of shape over it. If you're ever wondering what somebody with autism or an autistic person, how they want to be referred to, just ask in a respectful manner. Okay, we're always very happy to answer genuine questions, as long as it comes from a place of love, which I know you all do, so I'm not worried about you. But of course I'm recording, so who knows who else is listening to this. So again, that's my advice. But yes, autistic people don't know what they're talking about. That's the first stereotype. Okay, so back to RFK. We're going to go ahead and analyze this quote. So he gave this quote on a press conference on Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. And it's interesting because it is autism. Well, they call it Autism Awareness Month. I call it Autism Acceptance Month. But it's kind of a time when people are thinking about autism in April. So what is this quote that I won't be quiet about? So RFK claimed these autistic people with autism, however you want to refer to us, are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. I'm going to say right now, there's part of this quote I support. If somebody will give me get out of taxes free because I'm autistic, I'm like all for that. Unfortunately. But yes, I did get a tax refund this year, but I did pay taxes. So I don't know if that counts. But in all seriousness, as much as I'm joking about it, this is actually a really disturbing stereotype for a lot of reasons, because this rests on disabled people are burdens. Okay, this does not just affect autistic people, this is disabled people in general. Again, I'll be using the term disabled instead of person with a disability, so just kind of FYI. Okay, so Lauren E. Bixby explains, narratives rooted in ableism portray disabled children's as disabled children as burdens on their families. So have we seen this played out through time? Well, number one, you can take my disability class, which I'm teaching in the fall, real in depth. But in ancient times, if a child was born with a disability, many times they would be exposed. Okay, just left out on a hillside somewhere to die. If you look at the New Testament, a lot of disabled people are beggars. You know, told to shut up actually more times than you think. In the Middle Ages, sometimes they would lock disabled people in cages and have them fight each other for sport. And in the 1950s, they were put in institutions where multiple human rights abuses would often be committed. For instance, starvation, beatings. Many people kind of disappeared. Probably the worst of these institutions were not in the US, but were in Nazi Germany. Anybody ever wonder where the gas chambers came from? They did it on disabled people first. They would take people in these institutions for the cognitively disabled or those with mental illness and put them in gas chambers. That's how they tested it out for the Holocaust. So some of the first Holocaust victims were people with disabilities. And the justification that Germany gave, and I wish I thought to turn on the screen and pull up this ad, was there was a poster that said, "This man will cost 60,000 Deutschmarks. My fellow Germans, that's your money." So that's where you really see it. Okay, they'll never hold a job. I am a professor at Marquette, full-time. So we've already met one autistic person who has a job. But I will say this is what's frustrating about this quote. Is RFK is actually discussing some very serious issues that need to be discussed, and is just completely glossing over them and not giving them the attention and analysis they deserve. So, according to the A.J. Drexel Autism Institute, while 58% of those on the autism spectrum ever worked during their early 20s, over 90% of young adults with emotional disturbance, speech impairment, or learning disability ever worked, as well as 74% of those with an intellectual disability. Okay, so autism is the lowest amount of people who worked in their early 20s compared to other groups in the disability community. Those who did work were either underemployed or underpaid, many times both. They continue, young adults on the autism spectrum who worked after high school held an average of about 3 jobs during their early 20s. Nearly 80% worked part-time and earned an average of $9.11 per hour. Full-time workers earned an average of $8.08 an hour. So massively underpaid. I couldn't quite find what jobs many of these autistic people were employed in, so I can't really compare them to their non-autistic peers job by job. So, like I said, so sometimes you have to kind of understand what these statistics are, so I'm not gonna pretend I know them. Still, well, I mean, I know, but you know what I mean. I can't compare to non-autistic peers knowledgeably. Still, this mirrors wider employment trends among autistic people. According to Angela Andrews, in the world today, many fields are struggling to find people to fill roles after COVID, making it a shock that there is a population of highly educated and capable autistic individuals where 85% are unemployed. This is compared to the national unemployment rate of 3.5% as of June 2022. And remember, the employment rate is people looking for jobs. So at 58% of unemployment among autistic means that there are autistic people looking for jobs who are not getting them. Okay, so what is this a result of? Well, one thing we can kind of eliminate actually is education. The issue is not autistic people are uneducated. She continues, in addition, 35% of autistic individuals graduate from college versus the national average of 24.9%. Okay, so more autistic people are going to college than the general population, according to this statistic. So even when we do find employment, it's difficult. She argues those who do find employment are more likely to be underpaid, underemployed, and do not get good support, with a significant number expressing an inability to disclose they're autistic or in need of support. Okay, I will say in my experience, I have not found this problem with employers, but with students. Okay, 10 years ago, I was terrified to come out as autistic to students because many of them were in the biomedical sciences, and some of them had expressed some very stereotypical views of autism. So again, there was kind of that fear. It's gotten much better. I do come out to my students now, and it's never been a big deal. Some have actually kind of thanked me for doing it. So it's gotten better. I don't want to paint the wrong picture of students. You know, I want to give society credits where it's due. It is getting better. So there are also autistic people in lower positions than those without autism. She continues, on top of this, autistic individuals are far less likely to be employed as managers, directors, or senior leaders when compared to non-autistic people, even when compared with those with other disabilities. So autistic people you find kind of on the lower rung of the corporate ladder, whereas non-autistic people rise, and this includes people with other disabilities than autism. So why is this the case? Well, I will tell you, part of it is the hiring process. It is extremely intimidating for an autistic person. Because number one, many questions on applications are for very literal, or an autistic mind can be very literal. So on a job application, if you have a question you have to read between the lines, it is very difficult to think of it. So I'm going to use an example I found. Have you ever been pulled over? Okay. The way I understand it, maybe I'm getting bad advice from non-autistic people, is if they ask, have you ever been pulled over, they're really asking, have you had a ticket? Because the cop doesn't give you anything, they'll never know. Whereas an autistic person thinks, oh my goodness, I got pulled over for that taillight that one time. Does this disqualify me? You know, we run through all these scenarios in our head. If I lie, there's all these scary things that not only are going to be, are we not going to employ you? You could be subject to federal charges or something. Yes, I mean, there are some forms that say this. It is extremely intimidating. So for literal minds, sometimes they just don't even fill it out because they're just terrified of getting the answer wrong. Okay, think about the interview process. Oh, the interview process. How many people like interviews? Yeah. It's even worse for a non-autistic person. So we can't read nonverbal cues many times, or we have difficulty. I think it's more accurate to say many of us have difficulty with it. So you can't tell how the employer or potential employer is reacting to you. You can't tell how they're taking what you're saying. And you can't always understand the questions because you got to read between the lines. So we wind up way oversharing things. I know, that's how I feel about it too. Interviews are terrible. I do not like them. But yeah, many times autistic people kind of have to go to therapy to get through job interviews and learn not to overshare. Because many times we leave a job interview and an employer wonders why we didn't just give them our social security number while we were at it. So that's kind of the problem. Or maybe we answered everything but the question because we didn't understand what the question was, and we were afraid to ask because we didn't want to look stupid and we wanted to look as qualified. So again, it's difficult just to get through the application and the job interview process. But let's say you managed to navigate those. Congratulations, you got your job. Things don't get easier. One of these is interacting with coworkers. According to Claire Jack, the social and communication problems often experienced by autistic people can make it hard to form relationships at work, whether it's facing difficulties in socializing after work or struggling to comprehend office politics. The social pressures of work can render the whole experience unbearable. Another area in which autistic people can struggle is working as part of a team. Particularly, they have expertise in a specific area that they find difficult to include others in. So again, we're having trouble deciphering nonverbal cues. We're already kind of people who like to be alone, introverts, whatever you want to call us, by nature. And we don't like people slowing us down, and we don't like people calling us stupid. So because of that, we're not always very good team players. Okay, I'll kind of raise my hand. I'm not going to deny the charge fully. But I try, but I'm not going to act like I'm perfect in this either. So then there's also the idea of masking. Dr. Jack continues, autistic people often have problems with sensory processing. Add this to the issues with emotional regulation and communication issues, and it's easy to understand why autistic people tend to become easily fatigued. Many jobs place emotional or sensory pressure on employees to some extent, which can leave autistic people feeling exhausted. In addition, many autistic people will mask their autistic traits in the workplace. Constantly having to put on an act is tiring and stressful. So again, we don't want to look too autistic, so you've got to mask. You've got to pretend not to be autistic. This takes a lot out of you. So because of this, we get burned down on jobs very easily, and we are quitting jobs and moving on to other jobs. So according to Angela Andrews, in the world today, so because autistic traits have to be suppressed or curtailed, this can be difficult to socialize with everyone, stay on track. And then, of course, there's my favorite. Are you really autistic? Did you get misdiagnosed? Oh, yeah. According to Angela Andrews, either they, autistic people, are too high functioning to be autistic because the basis for autism comes from portrayals like Rain Man, or they're too low functioning because their basis comes from portrayals like The Good Doctor. Either leads to the same conclusion. They are lying and not worthy of consideration for the job. Okay, so we're not high functioning enough, or not low functioning enough. What do you mean you're not good at STEM? Aren't you supposed to be like Sheldon Cooper? Yeah. Yeah, logic's not a class I'm interested in, but you get that. So again, ableism plays a role. We ask for accommodations, they're not given. I have never had that problem for Marquette. Okay, I want to give Marquette their due. When I ask for things, I do get them. Okay, so it's not everybody, and like I said, I want to give Marquette their fair due. They do treat me well. But again, that's not every employment place. I've been lucky in that regard to have such a supportive university. So the results of all this, Andrews argues, are, in fact, research shows that autistic adults have the lowest employment rates across all disabilities. So again, RFK's touched on a real issue, autistic employment, a real issue we need support for, and basically just used it as an example that we're incompetent. So that's really, if you take one thing away from this is my objection to his speech, is that he's talking about real issues and just glosses over them, blames the autistic person, things like that. So let's return to RFK's speech. They'll never play baseball. This one really shocked me because he just completely forgot who his aunt was, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, the founder of the Special Olympics. So she was inspired in part by her sister. So the Special Olympics website claims Eunice Kennedy Shriver had a sister, Rosemary, who had an intellectual disability. She and Rosemary grew up playing sports together and with their family. The sisters swam, they sailed, they skied, they played football together. But in those days, there were limited programs and options for somebody like Rosemary. Okay, so it's kind of unclear what the nature of Rosemary's disability was. I've read kind of varying accounts. There's some controversy even among scholars. Problem is, with her living in the 1930s, 1940s, they don't have the same diagnostic criteria we have. They just didn't know as much. So it's probably going to be impossible. What we do know is she definitely developed a disability after being lobotomized. So, according to the National Park Service, in November 1941, Mr. Kennedy arranged to have a lobotomy performed on Rosemary. Mr. Kennedy being Joseph Kennedy, her father. It was immediately clear that the operation had drastically failed. Rosemary had lost most of her ability to walk or talk. Her personality had been forever altered, and she was left physically disabled. After being released from the hospital, Rosemary was immediately institutionalized. I think she bounced around from institution to institution for a time. If I remember my research right, she actually spent quite a bit of time in a Wisconsin institute. So she's, okay, good, I am remembering that right.
Jefferson, Wisconsin.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so, okay, a Wisconsin connection to all this. But definitely somebody who had severe disabilities, especially after her lobotomy. So, Rosemary had a profound effect on Eunice. She basically wanted people with intellectual disabilities to have the same opportunities people without intellectual disabilities had. And she felt the way to do this was through sports and athletics, giving them those kinds of opportunities. They continue, Eunice Kennedy Shriver believed that if people with intellectual disabilities were given the same opportunities and experiences as everyone else, they could accomplish far more than anyone ever thought possible. She put that vision into action in 1962 by inviting young people with intellectual disabilities to a summer day camp she hosted in her backyard. She called it Camp Shriver. The goal was to explore the children's skills in a variety of sports and physical activities. So obviously this grew and became the Special Olympics, which actually for a time I worked at an organization that helped people with intellectual disabilities, and we did do some work with the Special Olympics. I would kind of chauffeur one of my, I think we called them clients, to and from the Special Olympics. So autistic people can partake in the Special Olympics. According to the Special Olympics website, for athletes with autism, the social experience at Special Olympics events can be both rewarding and empowering. Not only do our athletes learn new skills and get to show them off, these athletes compete in a safe environment where they can interact with other people in a non-pressured, relaxing way. Okay, so again, sports are available to autistic people. I looked at the Special Olympics Wisconsin. They do include baseball. I think that's in the fall session. But yes, through the Special Olympics, autistic people can play baseball. Now, if you're like me and we're never good at it, that's a whole nother story. But it is out there for autistic people. They can do these things. So let's discuss the quote. They will never write a poem. This is based on the stereotype that autistic people are only good at STEM. Remember when I brought up Sheldon Cooper earlier? Yeah, that's where it becomes relevant. So, again, there's actually a very long history behind the stereotype. I'm not going to get into it because number one, we're going to be here an hour. And number two, I'd probably get so frustrated at one point with some of these scholars, I'd lose my job. But no, it's the third chapter of my dissertation. So if you want to look up Dana Fritz, the empathetic autistic, I always forget what comes after the colon. Something about the feminine autistic experience. Know that I do trace the origins of the STEM stereotype. Okay, but it has to do with the way people discussed autism in the 90s. That's a really quick way of putting it. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of autistic people who are very into poetry and are more into language arts. According to Chris Martin, only after working with neurodivergent learners for several years did I fully realize the special reciprocity between poetry and autism. I had been conditioned to expect a connection between autism and STEM subjects, but being a poet, I was eager to experiment. 5 years ago, I co-founded Unrestricted Interest. I think it's been going on for a little longer because this website wasn't as current, but the organization's still going, for the record. An organization dedicated to helping neurodivergent learners transform their lives through writing. The results have been staggering. Not only do autistic writers have a unique penchant for poetic language, but many of them, especially the minimally speaking and non-speaking among them, possess their own intrinsic idiolects and choose poetry as their central means of expression. So again, many nonverbal autistic people are writing poems and are finding ways to express themselves through art. There are autistic poets who speak out against RFK. Julia, I so apologize to her if I mispronounced her name, Julia Metro states, I have been publishing poetry professionally since 2009 on and off. I primarily do genre poetry, which is poetry that falls sort of in the speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and horror spaces. I have a book of horror poetry that will be coming soon from Kith Books that's found poetry from Stephen Graham Jones. My heart is a chainsaw. Poetry doesn't generally pay for itself. Most poets are not just poets. That's why I supplement it with my work as an attorney. Yeah, so, okay, more autistic people finding jobs. Yeah, I will say that I do sometimes write poetry. I'm not saying it's any good. It's highly metaphorical and would probably weird some people out, but I do write it. So if RFK is brave enough to read one of my poems, I will give it to him. But it does exist. I can't say it's good, but it does exist. Metro, who is undoubtedly a better poet than I am, continues, I am not only living evidence that someone can be autistic and a poet. I will challenge RFK Jr. to write a poem as good as me any day of the week because I don't think he can do it. I'm inclined to agree with her. So that goes back to RFK. They'll never go on a date. Okay, yes, I have been on dates. Yes, I have been in romantic relationships. No, I really don't want to talk about them because I think that some people would like to forget they happened, and I'm going to respect that. I've had good dates. I've had bad dates. I'm assuming that's most people's experience. You know, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but that seems to be a theme I find in many people's works. So, again, am I single right now? Yes. But that's just in part because I keep finding activities to do, finding ways to become a deacon, all that stuff. It just takes a lot of time. I'm just working on myself right now. And quite frankly, I kind of like the idea of just jumping off and going to Puerto Rico whenever I feel like it. And the only thing I have to worry about is who's going to watch my pets. Thank you, Mom. So, there are autistic people who've never had romantic relationships. According to Crown Counseling, about 50% of autistic adults have never been in romantic relationships. Now again, what age group adults is, I'm not quite sure, so didn't quite say that. Sometimes this isn't voluntary, okay? We need to acknowledge that sometimes an autistic person is not single voluntarily. Psych Central argues, of the single autistic people surveyed, 29% regretted their relationship status. Okay, and I'm not quite sure what that number is compared to non-autistic people, because I would imagine that there are at least a few non-autistic people that don't enjoy being single too. So I kind of wish I had those numbers to compare to each other, because now I'm kind of wondering how they would. I'd say the autistic number probably is higher, but again, I can't say that for certain. So also as a group, autistic people don't always date. Crown counseling continues. Only about 32% of autistic adults have a romantic partner at any given time. Okay, so about 66% of us don't date when the other 33 or so do. That's kind of interesting. I never thought of it that way. So it doesn't mean that autistic people don't get in relationship. That doesn't mean we're not happy when we do. According to Psych Central, they found that a vast majority, 73%, of high-functioning autistic people surveyed have had romantic experiences. In fact, only 7% of participants reported no desire to be in a relationship. The study also found higher relationship satisfaction among autistic couples compared with autistic neurotypical couples. Okay, so many times it's easier for autistic people to date each other because there's kind of a shared experience there. That's not always there when they date a non-autistic person. So that's kind of interesting. But even if we don't date, we can and do socialize. We do have friends. We do hang out with people. We may have to go off on our own more often than non-autistic people, but we do have friends. Okay, so finally RFK states, many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. Okay, I'm just going to say, according to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, most individuals with ASD eventually are capable of independent toileting. However, this may not occur at a typical time frame, around age 3. Okay, I'm not going to give statistics or anything on this. What I'm going to say is that the parents who are helping these autistic children should not have their pain exploited. They should not have their pain taken advantage of. These autistic children need patience. They need support. They do not need to be politicized. Okay, these families need services, not judgment, not to be used as a political pawn. Okay, so I've analyzed the RFK quote. Now I want to finish with an interesting stereotype that I found in my life. It's about 2021 when this happened. It's 21 years of age when this happened. We should make that clearer. Thank you being in the 2020s. Yeah. Anyway, I was about 20 to 21 years old, and I was working on a project in an honors program. And I was working, I think he was a librarian, but he was a devout atheist. And he had read a study and told me autistic people aren't Christians. And I said, well, that's not true because I'm autistic and I'm a Christian. No, you're not a Christian. Excuse me? You're not a Christian because you're autistic. Now, there are two things I find fascinating about this. Number one, he didn't doubt the diagnosis. That's usually what people do, is they doubt the diagnosis. So I found it interesting he didn't do that. But number two, he was an atheist. And he has nothing really to gain from believing this. At least nothing that even after 16 years I can think of that he has to gain. I think Christians have a lot to gain from the stereotype, though. Because it's easy just to say autistic people were a lost cause. That accommodating autistic people is unnecessary. Somebody leaves, they were just never a Christian. They were just hopeless from the beginning. So there's no need to create welcoming communities because they're just going to leave anyway. And I will say this. Most autistic people are not able to go into a church and not be judged for wearing sunglasses. Most autistic people do not join vestries, parish councils, decision-making bodies in churches. Most autistic people do not get put up for diaconate candidates, and they do not get chosen as diaconate candidates. Instead, they are excluded if we ask for accommodations, we are laughed out of the room, we are mocked, and we are told no. Again, this story happens over hundreds, if not thousands, of autistic people. I'm in disability theology because being a deacon candidate, you might as well. And it overlaps with philosophy, so philosophy professor. But again, this is a very common experience. The parents of autistic children feel judged. Autistic people feel excluded. Why am I telling you this? Because I want to encourage you and tell you you're making some really great steps to resolve this. Okay, number one, you accepted me, sunglasses and all. And you didn't just accept me, you let me be involved with you. You let me be a real member of the parish. That's huge. The other thing is you're starting an accessibility survey. Am I reading that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're starting something on accessibility. I wanted to tell you, you've done the hard work. Everything else is gravy because you created an atmosphere of inclusion. You created that atmosphere that accepts people with disabilities. Okay, you'll figure out the rest of it. That's just logistics. The culture is the hardest thing to figure out, and you've got that. So that's why I told you this story, because I want to encourage you. And I want to tell you you're on the right steps. Keep it up. Okay. So, plus I want to end on a little bit of a positive note. Because this, in the last final 2 minutes, kind of the final 2 minutes I've been dreading ever since I got this position, really. There was supposed to be an adult forum in May, but I'm going to be in Puerto Rico. Exactly, y'all can go with me and we can do one. I'm happy to do it. But there haven't, because of CPE training and a lot of other things happening at the parish, I haven't really made any concrete steps to reschedule, and to be quite blunt, given that I'm going to leave in a couple weeks, other things I'm doing over the summer, it's just going to be too complex, so I haven't pushed the issue. So again, this is my decision to end it here. Okay, so it's my decision. I want to make that very clear that I'm the one who's decided this is the last one. So thank you. Just thank you for all you've done, for opening your parish up to me, for letting me take this position, coming to these adult forums, or watching online. I haven't forgotten you all too. Watching online. Thank you for your acceptance, your embrace. If you ever want someone to talk about disability, I'm not moving, and so just call me up. You know where St. Thomas of Canterbury is. I'll probably start there in the fall, but again, you know where to find me. We'll work something out, I'm sure. But this is not forever. This is not my last forever. This is a see you later. Remember, keep up the good work. Keep living in Christ. And as always, always live in love.
Thank you.